time and considering, I'm sure, your busy schedules. So today we're going to focus on unpacking effective feedback, turning insights into action. It's not just about creating great feedback, but what is going to be most effective and impactful. I'm Summer Whitley. I'm an account executive with Parsec. Actually, I would be both of your account executives because I work with Southern California. Actually, no, Erica, you would be with Taylor because she's got the Modesto area. But been with Parsec for a little over a year now. Absolutely love what I do and the products and services and support Parsec provides. I'll let Seyi go ahead and introduce herself as one of our our engagement managers.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Seyi Awosanya. I'm partner engagement manager here at Parsec, and similar to Summer, I've been here a little bit over a year, and my role here at Parsec is really making sure that our partners are satisfied with our platforms and services, and also building those strong relationships. So when you guys sign a contract with us, you'll be assigned to a PE, so we'll work really closely together to make sure that you guys are supported. So yeah.
Erica, Greg, just real quick, you want to let us know what school systems you're representing?
I'm with Connecting Waters. We have 3 locations, Waterford, Modesto, and Union City.
Very nice. Okay, so existing partner, Greg.
I'm with Compass.
Compass. I thought you looked familiar, Greg. Okay, I've been talking to Liz in the last week or two. Very nice. Great. Perfect. So both existing partners. That helps us to kind of guide the conversation a little bit as well. Robert, you want to go to the next slide? Key objectives, and these are pretty standard objectives for all of our webinars, and that is really just to be able to have a great conversation and everyone walking away learning something new. Making a friend. If you haven't made a friend today, Seyi and I are here. You can add us to your friend list, and then apply our thinking to our work. So we really want to have discussions and brainstorm even at parts during the webinar about how to actually apply this to the work that we're doing directly. Go ahead, Seyi.
Okay, cool. So knowing that we're going to be talking about how we gather feedback and turn that into actionable insights, we actually have a little icebreaker. And since we're in a small group, instead of doing the chat, we can all just talk about it. But wanted to just give you guys some time to talk through why is feedback important to you. And if you don't mind just sharing out loud.
I can go first. I think feedback is extremely important. One, because it lets you know where you stand. It lets you know what has happened in the past if you're somebody new coming in and you may not have the full background. And it lets you know how to proceed moving forward, because you don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been or where you are. So I think feedback is extremely helpful.
Yeah, it's a good point you make. What about you, Greg? You're on mute. Do you want to type it? We can type it and I can just read it out loud.
Okay, sorry, my Zoom was frozen for a second. And I was trying to well, I don't know what the sign for a frozen screen is, but yeah, I always, it's funny, I always look at feedback when my early days as like a communication major and just the loop. And you just don't know if the message is received or the information or the lesson, whatever, without feedback. So it's often overlooked part of the communication cycle.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned feedback loop because we'll talk a little bit about that in today's webinar. But yeah, you guys are right on the point with why feedback is important. And Robert, you can even go to the next slide. So I think we outlined that. So yeah, so you captured really why feedback is important. For us, it's important because you get to learn and it gives us clarity, right? So we get to understand what we did well, what we need to work on, so that could lead to better progress. It also boosts motivation and engagement. So if we're asking our students to leave feedback, it shows that we care about what they're thinking, right? And what they have to say, which can then just boost their motivation. It also promotes self-regulation. So really being able to reflect on your own processes and identifying your strengths and also what are some things you can grow towards. And then strengthens teacher-student relationships. So like I mentioned, when students know that they're being heard, it again just builds that bond with their teacher. And then also encourages lifelong learning. So we don't know what we don't know, right? So getting feedback, again, lets us apply those learnings into actions. Next slide, Robert. And then have a nice quote here by Grant Wiggins. So it says, learners need endless feedback more than they need endless teaching. So really, when we think about this quote, it just means that learning is really crucial for learning progress. It's better than just delivering new information. The most effective step in training is feedback, right? So when you receive feedback, it allows you to adjust and then take action and improvement, which is really an important step. So when I see this quote, that's really what I think about. Yeah, so then we're an ed tech data company, so of course we have to include statistics. So I won't read through everything, just I'll name a few. But feedback drives learning improvement. So a study by John Hattie found that feedback can improve student performance by as much as 50%, making it the top influence on student achievement. And then students value constructive feedback. So it really impacts their ability to improve academic performance. And then immediate feedback increases retention. So research done by University of Minnesota shows that when students receive feedback within 24 hours, you have a 78% retention rate compared to when the feedback is delayed by 1 week, it's 54%. So definitely want to give immediate feedback when you can. And then the last statistic here is just personalized feedback boosts motivation, which I mentioned in the last slide. All right, and then this is the assembly.
Yeah, just another question to kind of think on as we move and transition into the next part of the webinar. What are the barriers to effective feedback you guys are currently facing? And Mona, thank you for joining us. Good to have you here. Feel free to take yourself off mute at any time. We're kind of doing a discussion style today. So what are the barriers to effective feedback you guys are currently facing or challenged by?
For me, I can say easily getting feedback, just trying to receive it. I'm a board member at our school, and as a parent, I don't always respond. Talking to other parents and trying to get them to respond is really difficult. I've definitely noticed sometimes it's about the topic, because if we say, hey, there's a ski trip coming up, then there's lots of feedback. But if it's like, what can we do to improve the school? Maybe not so much. So sometimes it has to do with the topic, but it truly is just trying to get people to speak up and provide feedback. That I can tell you is 100% where I struggle, because I'm all about let's get the information so that we can make changes and improvements, but it's trying to get people to give responses.
So right now it's the collection and the response rate. I'm guessing if you're like a lot of other school systems, unfortunately, participation can be really low. And those that do participate, you hear from frequently. And oftentimes the participation we have is not always positive. Sometimes it's just a focus on the negative correction. So it forces us to almost be reactive versus proactive, right? So trying to change that mindset, as well as the way that we gather and collect feedback. What about you, Greg?
Oh wow, so many. And so many different types. I mean, definitely what Erica says, like the time and things that are competing for our attention and what we prioritize. I would love to get feedback at my daughter's school for lots of stuff, and look at all those emails and take all those surveys, but there's other things. And I guess the other thing I'll just mention off the top of my head is just our like the reception of the feedback and how we're, our perceptual screens or our past trauma, how, can we hear the feedback, or hear the questions to provide that feedback kind of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I really appreciate both of those responses. One from the standpoint that I'm a parent too. My son is in high school, and when I get that end of year survey or the SARC review of 50 to 100 questions, I'm like, I don't even have time for this, right? So one is the time, just the weight on parents and students and staff to really engage and give you honest, authentic feedback. But to your point, Greg, it's really even addressing sometimes our own bias or our own limited perspective if we're the receiver of that feedback. And how do we approach it and really be in a space to be willing to receive that feedback and then actually do something about it, and have the right response to it. So all really, really good answers. Robert, do you want to go to the next slide? As you can see, you guys named most of the most common ones, but lack of time, whether it's to develop proper feedback questions or the ability to take it. If we have really long surveys, survey fatigue is definitely something that's being researched more and more, and the effectiveness of that. Insufficient training, and this will probably go, Greg, to what you said as far as like those that are receiving it. What lens are we looking through? How do we put aside any frustration or bias that we might have? And then resistance to feedback, which you mentioned, and limited follow-up. So you guys saw the stats beforehand with the re-engagement of participants when we actually respond quickly. And I don't know if you guys were able to join our last webinar, but Tim Warner from one of our charter partners up north did a really, really good job of utilizing what we'll talk about in a minute, which is Parsec Real, to gather that feedback. But one of the things he was very effective with is responding quickly. And because he responded quickly, even just in small ways, the participation rate has grown very large in the last year or so in using that cycle of feedback and inquiry from his students. And so it really just does speak to enforce that statistic we saw a minute ago, in following up quickly continues to improve the participation going forward. Go ahead, Robert. To address the challenges, schools can. We're solutions-based, right? We don't want to just sit around and talk about the problem and not provide solutions. But one, provide professional development and effective feedback techniques. Depending on, obviously, Erica as a board member, Greg as a leader within a charter organization that's relatively large, all the way down to the teacher level, being able to create some professional development around receiving that feedback. Use technology to streamline the feedback process. There are a lot of ways in which you can use technology now to make it easier. And we'll share one of those with you. If you guys aren't familiar with Real, we'll talk about the time that it can save. Fostering a growth mindset among students to view feedback as a tool for improvement. So this is a little bit of a catch-22 in the sense that my background is in high school admissions. And so going in and speaking with high school juniors and seniors, they will tell you their story and they want to share with you if you give them that space to communicate. But they also want to know that their voice is valued and heard. So that goes back to that response, right? And so I think even just if you start out with low participation and you start to really let students know how important their voice matters to your system, it goes a really long way. And then encourage two-way communication between teachers and students. I know a lot of times long are the days where children should be seen and not heard. We want to create that space where they can give feedback, but they can also receive feedback. And so we want to create a very positive environment around that two-way communication. Go ahead, Robert. This is you, Shay.
We had a question from Mona.
Oh, go ahead. Do you have examples of what the feedback can look like, simple to more complicated? You can shake your head yes or no, Mona. I know you're in a busy environment. Are we referring to samples of like the questions we ask, or samples of what the feedback is that we get from students and staff?
It's quiet. I'll respond real quick.
Okay.
I was mostly thinking about when you were talking about giving the feedback after you've asked for it, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So the quick turnaround. So like, is it a simple like, this is how many people responded to our survey, thank you so much, versus more complicated, like more information? Or that's kind of what I was asking. Like, what can it look like in the different situations for that feedback that you're trying to get
Yeah.
back quickly?
Really good question. So I think to your point, there's different levels, depending on if you're attacking a heavy topic like culture and climate, and you get, really heavy responses. That might be something that you respond and say, "Hey, we've heard you. Here's what we identified as the reoccurring feedback, and here's where our next steps are." Maybe you don't have a full plan yet, but our next steps are to meet as leaders and develop a plan, right? One of the tools with Parsec Real that we recently added is a communication tab that the technology will analyze just a quick email that you can send out that says, "Hey, here's the results of the reel, and here's what are our identified themes." So that's kind of the basic, easy way. I mentioned Tim earlier, so I'll just give an example for him. He was applying for the Community Engagement Initiative grant, the CEI grant. And some of the feedback that they receive from their students is that their culture on campus was not what they wanted it to be. And so they started really thinking about ways that they could adjust and create more of a culture on campus. And he's done a great job at doing follow-up reels to say, "Okay, we received this information. What are some things you would like to add?" And it's gone as far as now, if we're talking really big projects, is the students felt like the space that they were currently at was very small. And they had small classroom sizes. What's crazy is one of the reoccurring pieces of feedback he received is that the classrooms are dark. A lot of them were older buildings and didn't have windows. And so that again goes to kind of climate and culture. And so it's led him now to where he's actively looking for a bigger building and a new location for the students. So I think if we take the time to let them know that they've heard and we re-engage, and we ask them follow-up questions, our students oftentimes will kind of lead us down this path to start to meet their needs and really be able to identify how we can improve for them. But to your point, I think it starts with just that simple response. All right, Shay, we'll turn it over to you.
I think real
Okay,
quick.
cool. So,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Greg.
Oh yeah, everybody likes being heard, and everybody likes hearing their name. And just making that connection. Oh, you heard me, and soliciting my individual follow up makes people feel good and a part of that community, or respected or valued. And that's like a small step to get more later. So agree.
Yeah, thank you,
And
Greg.
your point too. Yeah, students like to be acknowledged, right, Greg? So yeah, that's a good point that you made. All right, so going back into our slide deck, Summer talked about barriers. And so I think as we think about how we want to gather effective feedback, it's important to remember that sometimes it can feel overwhelming, but there's improvement with small steps, right? So Summer mentioned Tim at Aldergrove had some examples of that where he was able to take the feedback and make some small steps towards change. So feedback is important to understand that it's not just about pointing out what's wrong, but just identifying where that area of growth is possible, no matter how small it is. And then next slide. So knowing that our improvement starts with small change, it's important to think about how we want to empower students. And I think, Greg, you mentioned it's important to change the way that we think, right? When we're thinking about how we want to gather authentic, meaningful feedback. And so we have a couple of tips here, just as we think about how we want to engage with our students. So giving people the opportunity to share in their own space, in their own time, in their own way. I know for me, I share feedback in my own way, right? That's maybe not the same as Summer or Robert or Greg. So acknowledging that I may need more time to give more thoughtful response is important. And then don't ask more questions, ask better questions. So we often think the more questions we ask, the more feedback we gather, and that's not really always the case. Quality really matters more than quantity. So when we ask better questions that are phrased differently and encourage that deep thinking, we get that deeper reflection. So for example, I could ask you guys, did you enjoy this webinar? And you guys would say yes or no. But if I ask you what exactly about the webinar did you enjoy, it gives me more deeper insight. So just being mindful that it's important how we phrase these questions towards our students or parents or even teachers and staff. And then the last thing that we've really talked about is establishing that feedback loop of questions and responses. It's really important that we make sure that we're cycling the reflection, right? Feedback isn't just delivered and forgotten. It's really an exchange between two people, whether that's students, teachers, students, and your leadership team. And so when you combine these three strategies together, you're really just creating ongoing dialogue, which we've been talking about at our company, which can just lead to like lasting improvement. So just some things to think about. And then I'm gonna just walk you through what the current state of feedback gathering is. I'm sure you guys are all aware of this, and we can, if you have anything to chime in about, let me know. So the first thing is finding the problem. It's really the first step. And so before we can look at what we need to fix, we need to identify exactly what the gap is. So what's working, what's not working, and being able to pinpoint where we need to, give our attention. And then once we've identified the problem, we typically will have a focus group. So we'll meet with students or teachers to gather their perspective and understand their experience. And then we have the empathy interview. So this is a little bit more deeper, right? We're able to really dig a little bit deeper into the perspective, but it doesn't always give you exactly what you need. And then the fourth is once we have all of the information from our focus groups and our empathy emails, we analyze all of that data. And whether that's a Google spreadsheet where you guys are filtering to find out what the summary is, it can typically take a lot of time and resources. And so we do have a solution. And then the fifth solution or the fifth step is finding the solution. So once we've identified what the problem may be, we can start working towards a solution to fix what, the students are bubbling up or acknowledging that. So that is our current state of feedback. And then why it has to scale. So sometimes we exclude the key voices. We exclude those, whether that's unintentionally, people who actually are going to be affected by the changes that we make. So we always want to make sure that we're including all voices, whether that's parents, your community members, your students. And then by listening to everyone, right, you can really, by not listening, you can miss the full picture. I think, Greg, you mentioned that earlier in the webinar, which can really help us from making meaningful improvements. And then has to scale. Schools are slow to learn and improve at scale. And then you can change becomes something dreamt about, but not really achieved. So I'm going to pass it on to Summer now, and you're going to talk about how we can do this at scale.
Yeah, so scale is really a word that oftentimes we look at, and obviously we think of sample size, right? But if we dig a little deeper behind that, and we really look at limitations when we're sending out and asking for feedback, it's not just participation rate, but if we are doing really deep work like empathy interviews or focus groups, you're usually taking a representation of that student group, whether it's by demographic or SED or anything like that. And so you want to enhance that. Oftentimes we can't hear from our littles, our first and our second graders, because maybe they can't read to participate in those questions. How often is our data skewed with our special ed departments if you have a student who maybe has reading challenges or things like that? And so when we're talking about looking at things at scale and really trying to truly create a feedback forum and cycle that is authentic and captures all of the voices represented within your school system, that's a very, very heavy lift for many of our partners. And that's where the thoughts kind of came around with Parsec Real. How do we do this? And how do we give the opportunity to be very, very inclusive with anyone within the system, parents, students, staff, community members even. Go ahead, Robert. And so that's where Parsec Real came along. And honestly, we don't even use the word survey at Parsec. That's a bad word. We say it's a reel, but Real turns qualitative data into actionable insights. And the reason why we say that is because I'm going to give you guys just a couple of stats real quick. I've been doing some research on survey fatigue, and I found quite a bit of data, but one of the pieces from Jotform I found is that surveys, or in this case, we'll say reels, with 1 to 3 questions have a completion rate of 83.3%. 1 to 3 questions. But when you go up to just 15 questions, that number drops to 41.9%. So you're talking 50% less participation just by adding an additional 10 questions. So Reel is even set up for 3 to 5 questions. You can go as low as 1 if you wanted to, but typically we say 3 to no more than 5 questions because that gives us that foundation. And then this tool is so quick and so fast and efficient. You can always do a follow-up reel immediately to respond and ask for deeper level insights. And then we're eliminating some of that survey fatigue that's so common. So why we turn them into actionable insights is because students and staff and parents have the ability to use audio, video, or text to respond. Erica, I'm going to throw myself under the bus. I'm a busy parent. I multitask everywhere I go. And if you ask me to sit there and read 50 to 100 questions, I'm probably not going to get through all of it, or I'm going to just start selecting A through B, right? With Reel, if I have the ability to have a question and then just hit record and respond by talking, I can do that in a parking lot very quickly, very easily, and just save it and go on. Same thing with audio or video. I'm sorry, my background, like I said, in high school admissions, the number one response I would get from high school students is they all wanted to be influencers. Now they can be in some way, shape, or form or capacity. And then you have the students or the parents that are still able to respond via text. If they're concerned about going on video, maybe they're a little bit insecure. Maybe they're not quite comfortable completely being, transparent yet. They can start with text and then oftentimes develop from there. Go ahead, Robert. But what we want to look at as far as an ideal process, right? We want to move towards being more efficient and effective with the way that we work. First, we want to identify data insights. So one of the examples we gave with Tim is he started asking about the how he can make the campus better. A lot of feedback came in and said that it was a little bit dark on campus. So then he selected more questions to go ahead and ask deeper about some changes and ways they could improve it. With Reel, we do have a lot of different ways that you can do it very easily. We have a question bank. We also have an LCAP optimization tool if you're looking at using this to connect with your measuring the effectiveness of your actions. You just copy and paste an action and action description from your SIPSA, SARC, or LCAP, or you have a thought partner who is one of our learning integration specialists that will help you develop good questions that you should be pushing out. You launch the Reel, or you schedule a date for it to be launched, and then you receive that feedback. When the Reel closes, it takes Shay, an hour or two to receive the analysis of that?
Even less than an hour.
Yeah. So within an hour or so, you're going to have your sentiment analysis, your top themes that were generated by question, and you even have that communication tool to now be able to respond very quickly. But now we're starting to understand the why. Now we're starting to get underneath what is really going on and how we can get better. And that allows us to not just take action, but take the right actions. Go ahead, Robert. Best of all, I don't know if you guys have looked at other platforms, but one of the things we pride ourselves on at Parsec is really not limiting who or how people can benefit. And so with Parsec Reel, students, educators, parents, and community members are able to give feedback because it's unlimited reels and unlimited times that you can use that within a school year. Go ahead, Robert. Shay, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah. And then we have some example of questions that we have drafted, just if you guys want to take them and use them for your own, or if you have Reel. So for students, what does your child enjoy most about school and why? And as you can see, look at how the questions are worded, because that really affects the response that you'll get. So are there changes you would like to see in how the school communicates with parents? Are there any areas where the school could do more to ensure all students feel safe and respected? And then what are your goals for the rest of the school year, and how can we help you achieve them? These are all great questions to ask your students to gather that deeper insights. And then the next slide, I believe we have questions for parents. So are there any challenges or concerns your child has shared about school recently? How does your child feel about their learning experience so far this school year? Are there any areas where the school could do more to ensure all students feel safe and respected? And then what is one way we could better support increasing attendance? So we typically will have partners who are struggling with their attendance rate. And so this is a great question, not only to ask the students and the teachers, but to get in front of the parents and see what's going on. And then I believe our last question bank is teachers and staff. So how would you describe the school's overall environment and culture this year? What challenges have you faced and how can the school support you in addressing them? What professional development opportunities would you find most helpful? And then what suggestions do you have for improving communication around the school community? So as Summer mentioned, being able to hear from all voices within your system, these are some examples of questions that you can ask. And then Summer?
So at this time, we just wanted to open it up a little bit for questions and see, how we can help talk through some more with you guys about effective feedback.
That's a cool looking tool. So the AI goes
Mhm.
through and
Mhm.
and whether it's audio, visual, video, or or text. That's
Yep.
pretty neat.
And a couple of things too, Greg, and I think there's even a slide on it that we didn't mention is there's also something called interviewer mode. So when I mentioned capturing feedback from your littles or even maybe some of your special ed students, you can have a teacher or an older student or a parent ask the question of the student, and then they can respond verbally. And the AI technology will analyze that. And then one of the other features, which has been a huge add over the last, I would say 6 to 7 months, is the ability to translate other language models, including Spanish. So if you have parents that are only Spanish speaking, whereas before you couldn't really include them in that feedback, now you can, and it actually has the translate feature.
That's very cool.
Same thing if you're working with like EL students. Any other questions? Okay, Robert, you want to go to the next slide? Feel free to scan the QR code. We believe in showing you guys how easy it is. If you want to give your feedback, go ahead. But this really, more than anything, allows you to see how easy the application is to use. When you create a reel in the platform, it's going to give you a browser link like you'll see below. It's also going to generate for you a QR code. At that point is where you would push that out via your communication tool, whether it's Parent Squared, an email. If you guys are doing a live event and you want to post the QR codes around, you can. But this really just gives you an idea of how easy that is and what the student or the parent view would be if they scanned the QR code or click the link. It just says, let's go. And then you have your questions that they'll ask. Robert, next slide. And last but not least, we do have a summit coming up on February 5th and 6th. It is focused and centered around student voice and shaping education joint education leaders and shaping. That's supposed to say future, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
It was throwing me off a little bit there. I was like, wait a minute, what's happening? But we do have a student-led panel. We believe in incorporating student voice in everything that we do. So we even do that at our summit. We're going to talk about simplifying the LCAP process, in addition to really just doing this for, deep, impactful reasons with our students. Right now, we're moving towards accountability models and using feedback for the mid-year check-in, the LCAP, and things like that. So we're going to have conversations around that. And then obviously math improvement has been a big thing. So we're going to tackle that topic. Redefining success in schools and then transforming hiring practices are just a few of the topic. We'd love to have you here if you guys can join. That website link there is where you can reserve tickets for that. So Shay and I will hang on for a few more minutes. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask. If not, thank you so much for joining us. And we have these bi-weekly, so we'd love to see you on our next one as well.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Bye, Mona.
Thank you, guys. That was fun.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
I'm going to say thank you too. It's my first one, so thank you very much. It was very informative. And we already have a survey out that I'm realizing I need to go in and answer, so I will get to participate right away.